They'd doubled their marketing spend every year for 3 years, but hadn't grown at all. One of the first things I asked them was, what's your conversion rate? Now, they weren't even measuring it. If you don't understand what your customer lifetime value is, how do you know whether or not it's worth acquiring that customer in the first place? And what can you do to improve your customer lifetime value? Yeah. In my business, I hit a brick wall physically and mentally at one point. My wife actually came home from work. I was curled up on the floor crying, and she just went, you need help.
So we're here today with Nigel. I'll let you introduce yourself in a sec. We're going to talk about productivity. This podcast is called Driving Productivity. I've got Nigel Greenwood with me. I've got my wonderful producer Caleb here in the back, who's producer for the day, because Dave, our usual producer, couldn't make it. He's doing a stage show for a band. So have a good day, Dave. Thanks for being where I needed to be. So Nigel, tell me about yourself.
So I'm Nigel Greenwood. I had a corporate life where I learned how to map customer journeys, and I did that very successfully. And then went contracting with large corporates. Got fed up working with large corporates because the more they pay you, the less they listen to you. So I set up my own business back in 2013, working with SMEs. I'm really passionate about small businesses. My mum and dad both had their own small business. Both went through an awful lot of problems and had to close them. So I've developed some software which can work out what advice a small business needs and then delivers that.
Yeah. So your credentials are lived experience. You've been there. You've done it.
Bought the t-shirt, worn it out, and used it to wash the car now. Yeah.
Seen the good stuff, seen the bad stuff, and all the usual hits.
Yeah.
So, what about you? What's your thing? Are you into music, film, sport? What's your bag?
Oh, music massively. So I'm a huge Beatles fan. To the point where I've got an award-winning tattoo of John Lennon on my left arm, which I'm not going to show on the podcast. Love going to live music. I just think it's absolutely fantastic. I could describe myself as being into football, but as a spectator, but I'm a Bradford City fan, so there's probably lots of people listening that'll go, that's not really football, is it? But for me it is.
Yeah, well, you love what you love.
You do.
I love music as well. For me, it's one of my passions. One of the best nights I've ever had was in a lost and forgotten town in France with some biker mates of mine, where we stumbled into a casino that I can only describe as a scene from a Tarantino film, and we got blind drunk listening to music off my iPhone. But I'm off to Maiden in June. I follow a band called Limehouse Lizzie, who for me are Thin Lizzy now, but I'm a real fan of rock music from the 70s and 80s. But any good music does it for me. I have been known to be on the dance floor doing Bhangra as well. So
good for you. Don't you find music as well, though? It just brings out the emotions.
Absolutely.
I had my mum and dad loved the sound of music. In fact, when we cleared the house out, we found 6 copies of The Sound of Music on vinyl, and they'd all been worn completely flat.
Wow. And
they both said for the funerals they wanted music from The Sound of Music. So
left here,
yeah. I arranged that, and one of the songs goes, "So long, farewell," and we played that at both the funerals. And even now, so 8 years on, if I hear that, I've got to walk out of the room. And there's once I heard it in the car when I was going down the M1. I just had to pull off on the hard shoulder and just wept for half an hour. So it's an incredible thing. But I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's what you're passionate about, and that's where it's not just following your dream, whether that's in life or business. It's about following your passion.
Yeah. Well, I'm really passionate, in fact, fanatical about productivity. Something that I've done for a very long time with lots of different organisations. Similar career path to you. But given that this podcast, or whatever you want to call it, is called Driving Productivity, let's talk about productivity.
Okay.
So there is a recognised challenge with productivity. We're trailing behind some of our G7 neighbours. Productivity is critical to not just businesses, but actually communities as well, because it creates wealth. I think it's misunderstood. A House of Commons report a few years ago stated that we have a lack of productivity literacy. So the aim is really to talk to people like yourself about productivity, what it means to them, and share any tips for anybody who's choosing to listen to this podcast. So, from your perspective, what are the things that people need to be considering when they look at productivity? And in particular, let's talk about customer journeys as well.
Okay, well, I'm going to start off at a slightly different angle.
Okay.
So I'm going to start at the top, or some people may say it's the bottom. Government. I think there's an issue with the way government understands business, especially small business.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at SMEs, but go down to 90% of SMEs that employ less than 10 people,
Yeah.
they're worth over £2 trillion a year to the UK economy. It's huge. 6 out of 10 people in the UK are employed by SMEs. But the government, when it looks at all the support it gives business, all the help for innovation, focuses on 10% of the companies in the UK.
Yeah.
And they're missing out on the actual backbone of the UK economy. The small businesses that actually could need more help, that have ideas but don't necessarily have the budget or the expertise to put them into place, can be incredibly productive. And yeah, they can be harder to reach because you've got lots more of them. But if the government got that right and got the support right, I think that would have a dramatic impact overall on productivity.
I think education as well, Nigel. There's a real lack of understanding. As you know, I did an MBA a few years ago. We were on that together. And I was surprised to find there was very little in terms of modules on operations management. A lot on the sexy stuff around marketing, digital marketing, etc., which is very important. And automation's a key driver of productivity as well. But just that lack of understanding of what productivity is and how to manage operations, I think would help. And I think problem solving, basic problem solving, basic ops management should be taught from a very young age through into college and universities. Maybe that's my view, and I think we would benefit from something like that.
I don't disagree, and I think part of the thing is when somebody starts their own business, and typically it could be, or certainly in my case, you've been through the corporate world, you've learned lots of things. For whatever reason you leave the corporate world, you decide to set up your own business.
Yeah.
And you think you know everything, and actually you know virtually nothing. You know how to do some things really well, but in terms of how to run a business, there's so much to learn, and you've got to wear so many hats.
Yes.
And one thing that small businesses are really good at, that large companies aren't, is collaboration. And you get lots of that. So when you look at small companies working together, actually they can be incredibly productive.
Yeah.
But it's in pockets. And if they don't have the right support in place, then it's really difficult. And I think the other thing, to get onto the customer journey piece, is lots of businesses are set up because somebody's passionate about something, they're skilled at something.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily think about, have I got customers for this? How will customers benefit from what I can do? Even basic things like, who is my target market? And I mentor lots of small businesses. And one of my first questions is, who's your ideal customer? Who's your target market?
Yeah.
And you'll get SMEs or B2B SMEs.
Yep.
So, right, it's not. So, who actually has a need that your product or service meets?
Yeah.
And you've really got to nail that down, because once you understand exactly who your ideal customer is, you can build your whole product, your whole service, your whole
Yes.
business around them. And that's the bit, if you're totally focused on your customer and doing the right thing for them and you really understand them, that's when you become most productive, because everything you do is designed for the customer, and therefore you're going to sell more.
Yeah.
You're going to get feedback from your customers. That helps you improve all the time, and it just makes life so much easier.
Yeah, and when I've worked with large corporates, one of the things we do is we create personas as part of the customer journey mapping. So really knowing who your target is critical, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's probably 9 out of 10 small businesses I talk to haven't got customer personas, and I don't understand how you can really picture your ideal customer unless you've got that picture there.
Yeah.
And you might have 5, 10 of them, but that's the thing for me. If you really focus on the customer and doing the right thing, then you have to be more productive. And the best thing about it is, if you understand your customers and you're getting feedback from them, but useful feedback, so they're telling you how you can improve, then they're giving you all the information you need to have a really successful business that will be profitable, that will grow, that will be highly productive.
Yeah. And look, I think that's that moment of truth, isn't it? That interaction between what you provide the customer and the customer's demand, and actually seeking to understand how you perform against that. In systems thinking, they call it purpose measures method. Put in metrics to measure how you're serving your purpose to your customers. And look, it's just one of the ways of looking at it, but actually understanding what your customers want and how you're giving them a service in that respect is critical, isn't it?
It is. And I think you mentioned measurement. A lot of small businesses especially don't measure what they should be doing. A lot of large businesses don't either. They just measure silly things.
Well, they have hundreds and hundreds of metrics, and often they can't tell you the story. So the map versus the territory sort of thing, isn't it?
It is. And quite often they get lots of nice reports from the directors who don't really read them anyway, do they? Or make changes. But that, if you're measuring the right things, but also it's taking the time every week, set some time aside to work on your business, not just in your business, and always be looking at, what can we do better? That's the question to ask your customers all the time. What could we do better? And that's where you get all the answers. And I think another big bit is, have you got the right values and ethics within your business? And are you really clear what those values are? And that's really important, I think, when you're hiring staff as well. And it's a big leap to go from being a sole trader to having employees. And it can be incredibly frustrating, because if they don't have the same values as you and they don't believe in what the business is doing, how are they going to have the same drive and passion that you do? And without that drive and passion and feeling totally involved in the business, they're going to do a job. But you don't want employees just to do a job. You want them to be creative, constructive. You want them to be putting those extra miles in, not in terms of working many more hours, but in terms of looking to improve all the time. And it's having that culture of continual improvement that a lot of businesses just don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. So just back to the metrics for a second then.
Yeah.
A couple of examples of what people might measure. Sort of the volumetric versus the quantifiable. So often businesses measure things that are easy to measure, and they get lots of numbers, volume-based numbers, but actually they don't understand the quality and the qualitative side of things. So maybe just a couple of examples of both, if you can. That would be great.
Okay, so to give you a few examples, I've got working with small businesses. Often they either don't measure or will measure to a superficial level their conversion rates. So how many leads are they getting? How many of those convert to customers? But then how do you actually use that? How do you create the story? So if your conversion rate isn't 70, 80, 90%, what can you do to improve it? And often what they'll do is, oh, we'll do some more marketing, or we'll try a slightly different approach to marketing. And all you're doing is repeating the same problem, so you're just making the problem bigger and worse.
Yep.
So things like that, for me, it's, okay, I need to increase the conversion rate. At what point in that customer journey am I losing those potential customers? So I'll give you an example. Business that I work with, they'd doubled their marketing spend every year for 3 years, but hadn't grown at all, and asked me to look at why that was happening. And one of the first things I asked them was, what's your conversion rate? Now, they weren't even measuring it. When we looked at the conversion rate, they were converting 20% of the proposals they sent out to customers. So obviously that's not good enough. They hadn't even realised that. But then it was, well, what do we do about it? Well, how do you structure your proposal?
Yeah.
And when we looked at the way the proposal was structured, there was lots of room for improvement. Once we'd completely restructured it and just changed everything, and got more feedback from customers, the conversion rate went up to 50%, which immediately gives them a massive uplift in sales. Next thing for me is, what's your customer lifetime value? And I think there's lots of businesses that don't understand that.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand what your customer lifetime value is, how do you know whether or not it's worth acquiring that customer in the first place? And what can you do to improve your customer lifetime value?
Yeah.
And it's not just the length of time that they stay with you or the amount of money they spend with you. It's also, what referrals do they make? What introductions do they make for you? Do they talk about you positively on social media? Does that indirectly generate more leads for you? And again, it's understanding those customer journeys, and at what points in those journey can you enhance the customer experience and therefore the customer lifetime value.
Absolutely. And just on that, a much simpler example is that right first time. I remember working with lots of different call centres, and we talked about their metrics, and they measured average handling time and the number of calls an agent would take, and often the agents took the least calls, but doing some kind of coaching or mentoring. But we talked about failure demand, and actually tackling that would be more important. So how many of the calls don't actually give the customer what they want? And look into how to fix that. Look at the root cause, fix that, because that's wasted time, isn't it?
Yeah, I worked with a large corporate, when I was working with their call centres, on the wall they had all these electronic displays, and basically it was showing how many customers are in a queue, and the average wait time was 45 minutes, so they were struggling. And then it was, what's the average length of the call? And all that did was, all the call handlers then were, right, I need to finish this call really quickly to get on to the next one. But what they never worked out was the repeat calls, because they weren't sorting things out first time, were massive. And if you take the short-term view, yes, you need to get the queues down. But if you take the long-term view, if you give somebody the right training and support and time to fix that problem for the customer the first time they ring, they're not going to call back. And the savings are massive. Plus, you get the enhanced customer experience, you get greater customer satisfaction, you get further sales, all of those bits. It's about measuring the right things, but also understanding those measurements, and then what can you do to turn that dial.
Absolutely. I think it's critical, isn't it? And that piece around having the right training and support to get things done right first time. And of course the knock-on effect of anything, Nigel, they'll tell someone, they'll tell their mates, social media, they'll tell 10 people, they'll tell 100 now, how great the service has been. So getting that service right using that time effectively gives you time to produce more, doesn't it? And it's one of the productivity answers.
It is, and sometimes there's got to be some short-term pain, but you've got to understand the long-term gain that you're going to get from it. And I think that's where people go wrong sometimes. They're always looking for that quick win, and there are some, but they're few and far between. But actually getting the right processes in place, being focused on the customer, although you've got some short-term pain, long-term, you just build a better business, a more productive business.
Absolutely. So, where are we going for lunch?
We're going to Yummy Yorkshire.
Sounds wonderful, and that's where?
That's just above Denbydale. It's a dairy farm that a few years ago had an overproduction of cream, and the daughter decided she wanted to make ice cream. And it started in the usual way, that she made the ice cream for the family, and then some friends tried it and liked it, some of the neighbours tried it and liked it. So they opened a little ice cream kiosk, and that was about 8 years ago. And from there, what they've done is focused on the customer service, focused on the quality of what they do. And they've gone from having that little kiosk to they then opened an ice cream parlour that became a cafe that's now a restaurant as well. And they understand the customers completely. So they run trade markets.
Yeah.
So at Christmas time, etc., they use one of the bands for that. They've got a big barbecue area that they use. They're asking the customers for feedback all the time. And it's just an absolute pleasure. I do go there far too often. So when I go in, the staff now don't even ask me what I want to drink. They just automatically bring me a black coffee.
So, Nigel, whoever's listening now, small business, what can they do tomorrow? What can they start doing tomorrow? 2 or 3 things they can do, put in place themselves to start improving or thinking of improving productivity.
So number 1, create your customer personas so you really understand your ideal customer. And a customer persona for me is a detailed written description to bring those ideal customers to life.
Yeah.
So name them, personal circumstances, what job do they do, what social media do they use, what challenges do they have, what keeps them awake at night. That's number 1. Number 2 is start to map out your customer journeys. There's lots of things online and lots of help online. You can go to simplycustomer.co.uk, lots of free things there to show you how to map customer journeys. But map them out and start to look at things from a customer point of view. And imagine that you don't know a lot about your business, but just do something like look at your website and what's the first thing you see on your website? Is it what problem you solve for people? Or is it you telling somebody about a product or service or yourselves? Because the website is there for the customer, not for you. And then just put some time in your diary, an hour or 2 every week, and that's time to work on your business. So not the working in part, but to think about how can I improve. And I think the final bit for me would be
To the left or?
no, okay. The final bit for me is be kind to yourself. Because quite often when you're running a business, you can think that you're not getting anywhere. So set some time aside, Friday afternoon, half an hour, and just write a note to yourself. What have you achieved this week? And it could be something really small, but to think about the things that you've done. Think about where you want to get to. And if you keep doing that each week and just keep going back to you'll find actually you're making a lot of progress. Some things maybe it's slower than you want them to be, but overall you get there much more.
And maybe seek out help as well if you're struggling, because it's a lonely place being an SME, isn't it? Particularly if you're there.
think so?
Yeah, I think it can be. I think that for a lot of small or micro businesses where it's 1 or 2 people, can be quite challenging.
I think it's incredibly lonely. And in my business, I hit a brick wall physically and mentally at one point. My wife actually came home from work and I was curled up on the floor crying. And she just went, "You need help."
Crikey.
And what I did, I phoned 6 small business owners that I knew really well. And I said, "I need help. Will you give me a morning if I buy you breakfast?"
Yeah.
And we all met at Newby, Yorkshire, where we're going. And they've been brilliant. I could pick the phone up to any of them at any time, or have a coffee with them. I'd just be totally open and honest, and them with me.
Yep.
And you need those people in your life.
Yep.
You need, so whether you meet them from networking or whatever, other small business owners, but just be open and honest with them. Chat about the pressures and the problems that you're having.
Driving productivity, performance activity, like business electricity, resource to infinity.